Hello everyone, so let's start our first tutorial of Blender. So what is Blender? Blender is a 3D modeling tool. So it can be used by visual effect artists or game developers for designing 3D characters, 3D models, 3D environments. So it's one of the free and crowd-funded tool. So it does not necessarily means that it's better than Studio Max or Maya, but it's one of the kind and it's easily available and it takes all the punches for a 3D rendering in this 2024 era like reflections, lightings to create very realistic models. So it's a good model. So let's start. So as soon as you start Blender, so this is what you see in this whole Blender. So one is the area where all your objects are placed, just like Adobe Photoshop, where you see that each layer is a different object, or each layer has some different characteristics of the object. Like you can say in easy words that there could be a lot of different objects in a single layer too. So here in this case, there are no layers, but what's here is that you can see a collection that contains all of the objects. So you can create multiple collections. It does not necessarily mean there is only a single collection. The other thing is that by default you are in a scene called viewport, and in viewport as soon as you create your application, if it's not empty one, it's a general, just like here general. So it means that it has one 3D cube, one light object, and then one camera object. So these three objects are basically what makes this application start. So the other thing that is important is that when you see whatever you see right now is in object mode. That means this cube is a single object, this camera is a single object, this light is a single object. So by default you can see there are three different objects. So when you actually just create new shapes, you work in object mode, or you can say add a new object, you work in object mode. But when you want to work inside an object, like work on its one side and other side or other side, or it's just line which is called edge, or it's uh, vertices which is a dot point here, so you use this mode called edit mode. So you can work on any side of the object. Now you are like focusing on this single object. So when you are focusing on this, cannot edit these objects. You can see I cannot even select them. So that's why its whole objective becomes to select this object. So you can see here that I can resize its one part and not the whole objects, because in edit mode you work in detail with the object that you are right now focusing on. But in object mode you just resize it as a whole. So it's like object mode is like a basic mode. Okay. So the other thing is that there are some selection tools that, just like for Photoshop has lasso, circle, and select box, and then there is this cursor. So cursor is like a place where whenever you create an object, it is placed there. So you can see here, I have selected the cursor here. So now the object has been created here. Okay. So the other thing is that to create a new object, you have some default presets like circle, sphere, cylinder, torus, cone, and plane. Okay. So there is also a icosphere. Icosphere is actually used when you create rain particles or something that is falling from the sky. Okay. So the other thing is, let me put it here, because by default when you select cursor pointer, you also need to go back to the uh, selection point. Okay. So you can also use W for that as a shortcut, that what you want to what type of selection tool you want to use. So when you are in cursor mode, just press W, it will go back to the selection tool. So the other thing in this whole application is what you are seeing right now is called viewport or a scene view. So in this scene you just only work on objects, so you cannot see the colors, you cannot see the lightning, and so you actually cannot see the actual output that is finally being rendered, like animated movie has color and everything. So this is like just object working. So I can add objects here, I can manipulate the object like move or rotate or let's say resize, but you cannot do anything else in the object mode. If you want to do more, you can always remember there is edit mode where you can just select two sides of the sorry, let's say I select this front side and just edit them. Okay, like this, you know. So the other thing is this one is called display mode, which is a by default called a viewport, or you can say scene view. Then there is shader view. In shader view you actually can see what is the color of the object, but there is no shading or lightning, actually just color. So it's a solid color here. Okay, and if you go back to scene view, you can see you cannot see the color, but in shader view you can see the color and also do the same things just like the display mode, which is a scene view. There is one other view that is called wireframe. You can see only outlines of the object. So going further, after material preview or shader view where you can see the color shades, then there is rendered view. The rendered view is like a realistic view that you actually see. So you can see the lightning as well here too. Okay. So if I totally close it and give it like 2000 watt light, so you can see that light is actually working here. If I go back to the shader view, you can see there is no light effect. The shader view and scene view, which is this one, this is called scene view, they all have this like a sunlight that is from all direction, and you can easily see whatever is happening there. Okay, so this is the scene view is easier because if you are working in a very dark, you are creating an environment where there is darkness, you cannot see that in rendered view that what is happening there. So if I close the let's say scene light, scene world, so let's say this is how you will see the world, and you cannot be sure whatever you are seeing. So if I am going back to this how the world should look, so this is like, and I close this, you can see you cannot you can see that there is no light and you cannot see the object. So this is how, let's say, it was before. And okay, so giving it the default lights that we have used here. Okay, so this was scene view. So render view is like final view that you will see after creating your whole design. So in easy words, you can say just like HTML code. When you write HTML code, you don't know how will website look until you see it in the browser. So browser is like rendered mode. This one is rendered mode, and when you see the shader mode, it's also like a browser, but it does not have lightning effects of you the lights that you have added. But viewport is like a HTML code. You don't know actually how will the website look. Okay, so this is all basic. Okay, so moving further. So when you see what you see in this blender is in 3D. So obviously there are three axes X, Y, and Z. So if you are rotating your screen, you are somewhere in a very unusual angle, then you don't know which one is X, which is Y, or which is Z. So these area where there is angle, you can see this is called gizmos areas, where you have accesses, then there is zoom in, zoom out. You can also use mouse wheel and wheel down for zoom in, zoom out. Then there is hand tool. For that you can use shift click hold and then use middle mouse to move in the scene. Okay. Then there is camera view, which will be the final output that you will render for the audience to see. Then there is this perspective and orthogonic view. I don't know what's its pronunciation. Orthographic projection. Okay. So then You can see some colors are denoted assigned to them. So the x-axis is red, y is uh, green, z is blue. But you can now see blue axis here because by default in overlays where you can see these gizmos. Oh, sorry, this is called overlays. Gizmos is like hiding them. Okay, so in overlays you have this z-axis now by default disabled. So what I did was just enabled it. So you go into this overlay settings and just enable the z-axis. Now you can see the z-axis. So the first three things that we do during creating a model is to resize, rotate, or move the object based on wherever we want to place it in. Let's say a very dense environment is to be created by a designer. So you need to move, you need to scale, you need to rotate. So the easiest way to do is to right click and right click and see all the properties, but there is not these movement properties or other. So there is this shortcuts, but before going to shortcut, we can see there is properties in the right side of the blender, and blender has this transform property inside the object section where we can move them like this, like increasing or decreasing. But by default this is the zeroth axis. So it's up to you, whatever you want to do. You can resize them in x or y direction or z direction, or rotate them as per your requirements. But there are shortcuts. So S is for scale. So when you press S and resize them, it's very easier to resize in all directions instead of going to the object and transform. Okay. So the other way is to use S and then leave the S key and then press X axis if you want to resize the object in X direction. If you want to rotate, resize it into the Y direction, press S, then leave that key and then press Y to resize it in the Y direction. If you want to do it in vertically, just press S, then leave that S key and then press Z and then resize into that direction. Same is the case for the movement. Press G, then Z for moving further. Let's say moving in the upward direction, that is Z axis. Then press G and leave the key and then press X axis to move it into the X direction, and then press G again and then Y for moving it into Y direction. Okay. Okay, so the same is the case for rotation. Rotation is a little bit complicated. So rotation means that you want to rotate it into the y direction, just press R and then X. Now you can see the X direction line is visible and it's in the front side. So what you can do is rotate it into the X direction by rotating along the axis of X. You can see here. Okay, so when I want to rotate it into y direction, so what I do is press R and then Y and then rotate it into y direction. There is difference. You can see here when I'm in y direction, I'm rotated it along the y axis. When I'm in the x direction, I'm rotated it into the x let's say along the x axis, and same is the case for y. And when you press Z, you are rotating the object along the Z axis. Okay, so this is how rotation, movement, and scaling is